There was a name beneath the polished face of my wife's memorial that no one at the service could see but me. My daughter Beth had just called our family whole and unbroken, standing over the stone with 60 people watching. But beneath the granite was a faint row of shadows, the exact length of a name, not a flaw. Not weather. Weather softened stone. This had straight edges. I have restored memorials for 40 years. When carved letters are packed with color-matched resin and polished over, they disappear in direct light and return at an angle. These had returned. Someone had worked carefully to make a name vanish. The strange part was that I already knew how to prove what the stone used to say. Before it was set, Rockport had made a full-face charcoal rubbing for Ruth's records. She kept it locked in her studio, exactly where it had been since the day she died. After the ceremony, Beth leaned close and told me her mother had ordered a name removed. She said my son Caleb had cut us off 8 years ago, and Ruth had finally let him go. Ruth's records and Beth's story could not both be true. Someone was lying to me. The cemetery sat on a slope above Camden Harbor, close enough that when the wind came off the water you could hear the halyards ringing against the masts down in the bay. Ruth picked the plot herself, years ago, back when choosing a plot was still the kind of thing we could laugh about over coffee. She liked the view. She liked that the maples on that hill turned early. She had been gone 11 months. A stone takes time, the cutting, the setting, the season. You wait out until the ground is right, so the unveiling came late, in October, with the leaves already loosening. Beth arranged all of it. The stone, the caterer, the little printed cards with Ruth's name and a quiet serif, the order of who would speak and when. My daughter is good at arranging. She has been good at it since she was a girl. Lining her shoes by the door, keeping her half of the world square. I stood at the front, which is the widower's place, and I let her run the day. It was easier. Grief makes you slow, and over the last year I had learned to let the current take me where it wanted. But I have read stone for a living my whole life, and the stone in front of me was wrong. Granite is patient. You can polish a face until it hands you back your own reflection. But the cuts underneath stay down in the grain, and on the right afternoon, at the right slant of light, they lift toward the surface like something rising from the bottom of a pond. Most people would never catch it. I caught it because catching it was my trade for 40 years. Churches, courthouses, the worn marble in the State House, they called me, when a name had faded and a family wanted it brought back. Someone here had done the reverse. Someone had taken a name that belonged on that stone and worked, slow and careful, to be sure no living person would ever read it again. I said nothing. A memorial is not the place to be right. 60 people stood on that grass in their dark coats, some of them driven all the way up from Portland, and Beth was at the podium with her voice just barely holding. Whatever had been done to that plaque had been done months back. It would keep. 40 years of working on things that outlast the people who made them teaches you one rule above the others. The first move is never the chisel. The first move is to be certain. I was certain of a single thing, standing there with my hat in my 2 hands. The mark beneath the polish was short, one word, no longer than a first name, and the son I had not seen in 8 years was named Caleb. We took Caleb in when he was 6. Ruth had wanted a house full of children and her body had ruled otherwise, and then one winter a caseworker up in Bangor phoned about a boy who had moved through 3 homes in 2 years. Ruth drove north through a snowstorm to meet him and came home changed. He was ours by spring. He learned to sail off these same docks, called Ruth Mom by the 2nd month, and never once made the word sound like a reach. Then, 8 years ago, he stopped. That was the story I had been living inside ever since. I am not sure I ever fully believed it. When it ended, people came to me the way they do, pressing my hand, saying Ruth's name softly, like it might break. Beth stood in beside me and took them too, the steady voice, the right words measured out for each face. My daughter had held this family together with both hands since her mother got sick. I had told myself that 100 times. I told myself again right then. She caught me watching the stone as the crowd thinned. It came out beautiful, didn't it? Not a question. Then lower, before I could answer, I know you always wondered about Cal. Mom made her peace with it, at the end. She didn't want his name on there. After everything, she just wanted it to be the 3 of us. I told her the stone was beautiful. I told her Ruth would have loved the maples. I did not tell her that a plaque does not resurface itself in the ground. I did not tell her that across town, in her mother's studio, inside a flat file I had not slid open since the morning the ambulance came, there was a single sheet of paper with the finished inscription pressed into it in charcoal, Every letter, exactly as it left the shop, before any hand had touched it. That rubbing had been sitting in the dark for 11 months. It knew what the stone used to say. In the morning, I was going to go and ask it. I did not sleep. I lay in the dark listening to the house tick and settle, and a little after 5 I gave up and made a pot of coffee I never drank. Ruth's studio was at the back of the house, past the mudroom, in what had been a summer porch before she claimed it and put in a wood stove and a wall of north-facing glass. She painted there. Watercolors, mostly the harbor in every kind of weather, the same 3 fishing boats 100 times over, the lupine that came up along the stone wall each June. The door took a brass key that lived on a nail beside the frame, and I had not turned it in 11 months. During Ruth's last bedridden months, when she could no longer make it out to the studio, Beth had taken to using the space beneath the north window for medical records and cartons she said still needed sorting. After the funeral, I turned that key and could not make myself turn it back. Beth asked more than once to go through the room. To sort it, she said. To make things easier on me. Every time, I told her not yet. And every time, some quiet part of me was glad to have a reason to keep the door shut. As long as it stayed closed, the room stayed hers. Her brushes still stood in their jars where she left them, gone stiff. A cup with a half-inch of tea dried to a brown ring at the bottom. The last thing she painted was still clipped to the board, unfinished. A wash of gray water with the boats only sketched in. I stood in the doorway a while before I could make myself cross it. The flat file sat against the far wall, 5 shallow drawers of oak, the only thing in the house wide enough to lay a full rubbing-out flat. It was where she kept her big sheets, and where she had filed the one the shop sent home with the monument papers. I knew the drawer. Second from the top, at the back, behind her good rag sheets. My hands are not what they were, and it took me 2 pulls to get the drawer to run true. Then it was there, exactly where Ruth had filed it. A single sheet of heavy paper, longer than my arm, the charcoal gone a little silver with age. I carried it to the glass and laid it down in the morning light. A rubbing is made by pressing the paper to the cut face and drawing the flat of the charcoal across it, and the stone hands you back a negative of itself. The polished surface comes up dark. Every letter that's been cut into it stays pale, untouched, the exact shape of the incision. It is the closest thing my trade has to a photograph. It does not flatter, and it does not forget. Her name came up first, the way it should. Ruth Eleanor Mercer. The dates beneath. The small carved rope border she had asked for because it put her in mind of the harbor. And under that, the line she had written out for the shop herself, in her own hand, the winter before she got sick, so the cutter would space it right. Beloved wife. Mother of Beth and Caleb. On the stone in the ground, that line stopped at Beth. Here on the paper it ran on. And Caleb. Cut clean and deep and proper. The full name, not the Cal the whole town used, but the Caleb she had written on the adoption papers with her hand shaking, the Caleb she called down to breakfast every school morning of his boyhood. It had been on the finished stone. It had left the shop that way. Ruth had put it there on purpose, and set it right next to her daughters, where a mother would. And someone had gone to that granite afterward after her spacing, after her rope border, after her careful hand and sealed her son's name beneath the polish. I sat down on the stool at her drawing table. I did not weep. I have never been much good at it, and Ruth used to tease me for that. I only sat and held the paper, and let the thing settle into place in my mind the way a fracture settles across a slab. Quiet for a long moment. Then all at once. Beth said her mother ordered it done. Beth said Cal had cut himself off, and Ruth had finally let him go. But the woman who cut a rope border into her own headstone because she liked the sound of the boats did not strike a child's name off in anger. Not the Ruth I slept beside for 41 years. And if she had changed at the very end, if illness and grief had turned her hard the way Beth needed me to believe, then somewhere there would be a paper that said so. Ruth kept everything. Every receipt, every note, every letter that ever passed between her and the shops she dealt with. She had a system, and the system lived in this room. If my wife had ordered Caleb erased, she would have signed for it in her own hand. That was simply who she was. I looked at the flat file, and at the shelves above it, and at the row of boxes under the window with her writing on the ends. For 8 years I had believed my son stopped answering his mother's letters. I was holding proof in charcoal that she never once stopped claiming him. One of those things was false, and I already knew which one I wanted it to be. That was exactly why I made myself go slow. A man who only looks for what he hopes to find will cut straight through the truth and never feel it give. So before I opened a single one of Ruth's boxes, I sat with the story as I had been told it all these years. The last night the four of us stood in one room, and the silence that grew up out of it. The last night we were whole was a Sunday in October, 8 years back. I know it was October because the same maples were turning, and Ruth had the wood stove going out in the studio, and the four of us sat down at the kitchen table the way we had 10,000 times before. Cal was 32 then. He had left Camden at 19 and never quite landed anywhere after a season on the boats out of Gloucester, a stretch building docks down in the Carolinas, a spell of something he never fully explained. He came home maybe twice a year, and every time he came, he seemed to be measuring the house against some version of it he carried around inside him, checking whether he still fit. He never quite did. That was the thing about Cal I understood too late. A boy who comes to you at 6 already knows what it is to be sent back. He spends the rest of his life waiting for it to happen again, and he reads the smallest thing as the start of it. I do not remember how the argument began. That is the truth, and it shames me. Something about money Cal had asked to borrow again, not much. And Beth said something sharp about it being a pattern, and Cal said something sharp back about who in this family had ever actually needed anything. And then it was one of those fights where nobody is really arguing about the thing they say they are arguing about. I could have held the middle. That is the father's job, and I did not do it. I was tired, and I was worried about Ruth's heart with all the shouting, and when Cal turned to me to take his side, I heard myself tell him that if this house was so hard for him to be in, maybe he ought to stop coming back to it. He looked at me the way you look at a stone, that rings hollow when you tap it. Then he got his coat and left before the coffee was even cold. That was the last time I saw my son. He wrote, at first. Ruth wrote back the same week. Every week she was a great one for letters, my wife. She thought a phone call evaporated, but a letter stayed. For a while they went back and forth. Then, the way Beth told it, they began to thin out on Cal's end. He was moving around a lot. His address kept changing, and Beth was the one who kept up with him, because Beth kept up with everyone. She had his numbers. She had the forwarding addresses. When Ruth wanted to reach him, it went through Beth, because Beth always knew which town he was in that month. And the news Beth carried home got harder every year. Cal needed space. Cal was still sore about that last night. Cal had asked, please, could they stop writing for a while? And then a couple of years on, the worst of it that the letters Ruth kept mailing had started coming back to her. Refused. That Cal had told the post office, or told Beth, that he didn't want them. I believed it. God help me, I believed every word, and I will tell you exactly why. Because I was the one who told him to stop coming back. Every time Beth said Cal has cut us off, a voice in me answered, of course he has, you sent him to the door yourself. Guilt is the easiest lock in the world to pick. You don't even have to lie to a guilty man. You only have to tell him the thing he already believes about himself, and he will hold the door open for you. Ruth never took it the way I did. She kept a shoebox of his old letters on her side of the bed, from the early years when he still wrote, and she kept sending new ones out into the quiet even in the seasons Beth said they came back. I used to think that was just a mother's stubbornness. I used to find it a little sad, the letters she still addressed to a son I was sure had stopped reading them. I can see one afternoon of it plain as anything. 2 Christmases before Ruth got her diagnosis, she sat at that same kitchen table with a card she'd picked out special, a little watercolor of the harbor on the front, because of course it was, and she wrote inside it for a long time. When she finished, she held it out, unsure of his newest address, and Beth took it gently from her hand and said, I'll see he gets it, Mom. I've got his current place. And Ruth's whole face eased. I remember thinking what a mercy it was, that at least one of my children still had a line to the other. I felt grateful. That is the part I can hardly sit with now that I stood in my own kitchen and watched it happen and felt nothing but grateful. I sat there in her studio with the rubbing across my knees and turned all of it over. And for the first time in 8 years I saw the shape of the thing instead of just its weight. In 8 years, I had never once heard any of it from Cal himself. Not his voice on a telephone, not a single line in his own hand. Every wall between my son and me had been described to me by the same person. I had a daughter who kept the addresses, kept the numbers, kept the letters moving or not moving, kept the news of who wanted what. And I had never thought to wonder about that, because wondering would have meant looking hard at Beth, and Beth was the one holding us all together. The rubbing said Ruth put Caleb on her stone on purpose. Beth said Ruth took him off. Only one of them had left a paper I could actually put my hands on. So that is where I started. Not with my grief, and not with my guilt. With Ruth's records, a monument company, and a signature. Ruth's system was never complicated. It was only complete. She kept her paper the way she kept her paints, everything labeled and standing on end, so you could put your hand to what you needed in the dark. On the shelf above the flat files stood a dozen file boxes, and along their spines, in her tall, upright capitals, the plain business of a whole life. Taxes, house, car, medical, which had gotten thick in the last 2 years. And near the end of the row, one that said only arrangements. I lifted it down, set it on her drawing table, and took off the lid, and there she was in every folder. Her hand. Her order. The little brass paper clips she bought by the box because she hated the coated ones that left rust freckles on the page. She had planned her own, leaving the way she planned everything, so that no one would have to guess, so that Beth and I would not be arguing with a funeral director while we could barely stand up. Even in the dying of her, she had been trying to make it lighter on us. That took the wind out of me for a minute, and I had to just sit with it. The monument had its own folder, thick, tabbed in her writing, Rockport Granite and Memorial. I had known the Pelletiers who ran that shop the whole of my working life. A good outfit. They cut clean, and they kept their records, the way a good shop does. The estimate was on top, then the contract, then the proof. A monument proof is a simple thing. The shop draws the stone out at full scale. Every line of the inscription said exactly where it will fall, border and font and spacing, and they send it to the family, and the family reads it letter by letter, and signs the bottom to say, yes, this is right, cut it. Because once it is stone, there is no fixing a wrong middle initial. I had passed 100 of those proofs across a counter to grieving people in my own working years. I knew precisely what I was holding. There was the harbor rope border. There were her dates, left open at the back end the way they are before the fact. And there was the line, drawn out clean. Beloved wife, mother of Beth and Caleb, both names. Her sons spelled out full and proper, sitting right beside her daughters, exactly as the rubbing had it, exactly as the stone itself had once had it, before someone filled the letters with resin and polished them out of sight. And at the bottom, in the signature block, was Ruth's name in Ruth's own hand. I would know that signature at the bottom of the C, the long stem on the R, the way she never quite closed her letters, so each one sat like a little open door. She had signed it. She had read every last letter of that inscription, including the name Beth swore she wanted taken off, and she had put her hand to it and said yes, cut it in. Then I looked at the date beside her signature, and I had to sit down properly, because the date was the thing that broke it all open. She signed that proof in April, the April before she died. Not 8 years back, when the family was still whole, and a mother might list both her children without thinking twice about it. April, deep in the silence. Years after Beth said Cal had cut us off for good. Years after the letters supposedly began coming home refused, and already well into the illness that would take her by the autumn, my wife sat down with a shop proof and formally, deliberately, in her own hand, claimed Caleb as her son and carved it toward forever. That is not the act of a woman who wanted her boy gone. That is a woman planting a flag. I read the folder end to end, twice. The estimate, the contract, the proof she signed in April, the paid receipt. The shop cut the stone to her approval, both names on it, and it waited to be set until the ground had settled, which is the only reason I never laid eyes on it whole until the morning we gathered to unveil it. And nowhere in all those pages, not one was there an order to change a single letter, no second worksheet, no revision, no charge for packing the carved letters with resin and polishing them out of sight, which is real work, skilled work, the kind of job a shop writes up and bills for and keeps its own copy of. Whatever had been done to that granite had been done. But it had not gone through Ruth's file, and it had not been done in Ruth's name. Somebody had ordered a dead woman's memorial altered and left no trace of their hand anywhere in her careful records. So Ruth's papers were not going to hand me the who. What Ruth had given me was the what she wanted in April, in her own signature. And what she wanted was her whole family on that stone. The why I still could not reach. Something had happened in that last year to make a dying woman reach back across 8 years of quiet and set her son's name in granite. Ruth did not do sentimental things. If she carved that name in the spring, She had a reason with weight to it, and the reason was not in this box. If it was anywhere, it was in her letters. I put the arrangements box back on the shelf, squared to the edge the way she left things. Then I turned to the row of storage boxes stacked under the north window, the ones I had been staring past all morning without letting myself look at. Her correspondence. Everything anyone had ever mailed to Ruth Mercer. Because my wife, bless her, never threw away a letter in her life. I knelt down on the cold floor and pulled the first box into my lap. The first box was ordinary. And for a little while I let myself believe that was all there would be. It was Ruth's correspondence, kept the way she kept everything, sorted by year, by sender, bundled with the rubber bands she saved off the newspaper. Christmas cards, notes from the garden club, letters from her sister up in Bangor going back decades, the whole slow record of a good woman keeping up with the people she loved. Cal was in there too, in the early years. His hand on a Gloucester postmark at 19, telling his mother about the boats. A card at 25 with a folded 20 tucked inside that he could not really spare. And then, just the way I had always been told, his letters simply stopped. 8 years back. Right where the story said they should. I nearly put the lid back on. I had found what I came for in the arrangements box, I told myself. The rest was only grief with a rubber band around it. Then I shifted the third box to reach the fourth, and it was wrong in my hands. Too heavy for its size, and taped shut, not folded. And it was not part of Ruth's system at all. On the end, where she would have written the year in her tall capitals, there was a strip of masking tape, and on the tape, in a hand that was not hers, 5 words. Cal, do not give to Mom. I knew the hand. Any father would. I had been reading it on grocery lists and permission slips and gift tags for 43 years. But I made myself set the knowing down where I could not lean on it, because a lid is not a verdict, and I had been wrong before about what I wanted to be true. I cut the tape with my pocket knife, and I opened it, and I stopped breathing. Letters. Dozens of them, standing on edge, packed front to back the way you pack a drawer you mean never to open again. Every envelope in the same big, leaning, open hand I had watched take shape at my own kitchen table, over spelling words, over college forms, over the whole long becoming of a boy. Cal's hand. Cal's. Past any question on this earth, they were sealed. Every last one still sealed, the glue never lifted, not a single one of them opened. Not refused to his face, not sent back, not even read. Only lifted out of the mail, and boxed, and kept in the dark under 5 words that decided, for a mother who trusted her daughter to carry the mail, what she would be allowed to receive. I sat back on that cold floor and I could hear my own pulse in my ears. I laid them out across the boards and read the postmarks like a man reading the calendar of his own blindness. They did not stop 8 years ago. They did not stop at all. Portland. Then Portsmouth. Then a little town in Nova Scotia I had never once heard him name. Month after month, year upon year, my son had sat down wherever he had washed up and written home. The newest in the box was postmarked that last summer, only a little quiet between it and the end of her. Every month of the silence I had blamed him for, he had been writing into it. For one terrible minute I turned the worst of it over, that the hand which put those letters in the dark was Ruth's, that I had been married to a stranger for 41 years. But I had just spent an hour with my wife's signature, and this label was not her writing, and I knew whose it was, and knowing it did not feel like triumph. It felt like the floor going out. Before I did anything else, I did the one thing I had not let myself do yet. I drew a letter out of the middle of the stack, an old one, soft at the corners, and I worked my thumb under the flap and opened it. Mom, it began, I don't know if these are even getting to you. I keep writing anyway. I figure one of them has to make it through in the end. And if it never does, at least I'll know I didn't stop trying to come home. I did not read the rest of it standing up. I could not. When I could move again, I sat there and made myself think it through the way you think through a stone before you touch it. That box lid was in my daughter's hand. I did not doubt whose it was, not for a heartbeat. But a lid in her writing would prove she kept my son's letters from his mother. It would not, on its own, prove who took a chisel to Ruth's headstone. And if I ever meant to lay the whole of this in front of Beth and not have her wave it away as her father's grief-inventing villains, I needed the stone nailed down by someone with no blood in this family at all. I needed a witness from outside my own kitchen. There was only one place that witness could be. In the morning, I drove to Rockport, Rockport Granite and Memorial sits where it has sat since before I ever came up in the trade, a low shed and a yard of blanks and half-cut stones out on the county road, the good gray dust of the place gone into everything. Gerard Pelletier was in the office with the same coffee ring on the same desk his father used before him. We had known each other 40 years, one stone man to another. He took a single look at my face and set the coffee down. I laid it out plain. I told him somebody had concealed a name on my wife's memorial, that I had good reason to believe it was done through his shop, and that I needed to see whatever paper his shop had kept on it. I did not raise my voice. You do not need to with a man like Gerard. His records are his conscience, and I could see him already going pale around the meaning of what I'd said. He did not argue and he did not stall. He went to the cabinet along the back wall, and he was gone a few minutes, and he came back with a work order, the shop's own carbon copy, soft yellow with age, and he laid it in front of me and did not sit back down. He walked me through it the way he would have walked a widow through an estimate, quiet, careful, ashamed. A woman had come in that October, he said. On her own. She had told him her mother was failing fast, that there had been a hard falling out with a son years back, and that the family wanted the boy's name taken off the stone before it was set. She had said it was what her mother wished, and that her mother was long past being able to come in or hold a pen. She was the contact of record on the account. Ruth's own contract had named Beth the authorized family representative if illness ever left her unable to act, and by then it had. She had handled every piece of it through the illness. There was no reason on this earth for Gerard to doubt her. We don't grind a name off, he said, almost to himself, needing me to understand his shop had done it properly, even as it broke my heart to hear. You never grind. You pack the old cuts with a color-matched resin, and you polish the whole face flush, so it reads clean as new. In the right light, if a man knows to look, the old letters shadow up through it, but most folks never look. He glanced at me and looked away. You'd look. Then he turned the order around so the signature at the foot of it faced me. I took Beth's memorial papers out of my coat and set them down beside it, the master list for the day, the little note she'd left me on the counter, and I did not need 40 years of laying one hand against another to see it. The same signature. The same daughter. On the page that ordered her brother sealed out of his mother's grave, and on the pages that ran the morning we put that mother in the ground. It is one thing to know a thing alone in your own house at midnight. It is another to have a decent man say it to you across a desk in the daylight, a man with no reason in the world to lie, and every reason to wish he had nothing at all to tell you. Gerard had watched my daughter sign that order, and believed to his bones he was helping a grieving family lay their trouble down. He had not been. He had been handed a lie with her name on the bottom of it. He walked me out to the truck. At the door he stopped, and he said the thing I had not let myself get to yet. Simon. Her mother. He turned his hat in his hands. Did she ever know? I told him the truth. I did not know yet, and I was going to go home and find out. I went back to the studio and knelt at the box a last time, and understood that whatever had reached Ruth would never be in the pile of what had been kept from her. A letter that got through would not be filed with the ones that didn't. It would be kept close, with the things she could not stand to lose. I knew where that was. Their bed was still made on my side, and turned down on hers. For 11 months I had slept on top of the covers rather than disturb the way she left them. On her nightstand sat the shoebox, an old one, the cardboard gone soft and furry at the corners from handling, the word Cal across the lid in her capitals. I had known it was there the whole time. I had never once been able to lift the lid. I lifted it now. It was the good years, kept close. Cal at 7, a crayon boat with far too many portholes, Mom printed across the top in a child's fist. A report card. A Father's Day card he made me that had somehow migrated into her box, because she kept the things I couldn't. His letters from 19 and 20 and 22, the boat years, the dock years, folded so soft from rereading that the creases had gone to cloth. And near the top, not soft at all, still crisp, was one that did not belong with the others. A white envelope in Cal's grown hand. A Nova Scotia postmark. Up in the corner for the first time in 8 years, a return address set down plain, as though he had finally decided to stop being a hard man to find. Dated the last week of September. The very autumn she died. Opened. The only one of all of them that had ever been opened. I took the letter out. It was not long. My son was 40 years old by the time he wrote it, and you could hear every one of those years and how few words he allowed himself. Mom, this is the last time I'll put you through it. 8 years is long enough to take a hint, and I've taken it. I promise. But I got to thinking lately that maybe you never heard any of it in your own words. That maybe somebody else decided this for the both of us. And I couldn't sleep anymore without asking you the once, straight out. Do you want me to stop? If you tell me to stop, I'll stop, and I'll never trouble this family again. But if some part of you has been waiting the way some part of me has been, then just say the word, and I am in the truck the same day. I'm not too proud for it anymore. I only want to come home. There was a phone number under his name. He had never in 8 years let a soul give me a way to reach him, because the one who kept his numbers had made sure of that. And here it was, in his own writing, held out straight to his mother. I turned the envelope over to slide the letter back, and that is where I found her. Across the back, in Ruth's hand shakier by far than the signature on the proof. This was later. This was the very end of her 5 words. Please help me bring him home. By that last week of September, my wife had almost no voice left. The illness had taken her words from her a piece at a time, and her hands trembled too badly for a telephone even on her good days, and there were not many good days left. She could not have called him if her life hung on it, and in a way it did. I will never know the exact accident of how this one slipped through which carrier, which afternoon Beth had stepped out for the prescriptions, which minute the door happened to be Ruth's own. I only know that for once it was hers, and she opened it, and she learned in a single page what it would take me a year and a locked studio to find out. That her son had never stopped. That every silence she had been handed had been made by somebody's hand. And here is the thing I cannot get past, the thing that tells you the whole of the woman I married. She had already signed his name onto that stone back in April, 5 months before this letter ever reached her. She did not need Caleb's letter to make up her mind about her son, because her mind had never once changed. In the spring, when she still believed he had cut her off for good, she sat with a shop proof and cut him into her own grave beside his sister anyway, because that is where he belonged, and she would not pretend otherwise, not even in granite, not even at the end of everything. The letter did not turn her back toward him. Nothing had ever turned her away. What it gave her, in that last little while she still had her wits, was the one thing crueler than plain grief, the knowledge that she had been lied to, that her boy had been out there reaching for her the whole time, and that she no longer had the voice, or the strength, or the days left to reach back. So she did the only thing still in her power. She wrote 5 words on the back of his envelope, and set it in the box where she kept what she loved, and she waited to find the strength to put it into my hands. That strength never came. Within a few weeks she was past knowing the season, let alone the letter in the shoebox. Whether Beth saw Ruth open that letter or found the envelope afterward, I could not know yet. What I did know was that within weeks she drove to Rockport and had Caleb's name sealed beneath the polish. The timing was too exact to ignore, but timing was not proof. That answer would have to come from Beth. I sat on Ruth's side of the bed a long while, the letter in one hand and my son's phone number in the other, and for the first time since that shadow surfaced on the stone, I knew exactly what I meant to do, and in what order I meant to do it. I was going to call my son. But first, that night, I was going to sit down across the table from my daughter, and lay the whole of it between us, the box in her own hand, Rockport's carbon with her name at the foot of it, April and October, her mother's 5 words, and let her tell me to my face why. She came at 7, the way she always came, because I called and asked her to, and because Beth answers when she is called. That is the part I keep having to hold in my 2 hands, even now. Whatever else my daughter is, she comes. She let herself in the kitchen door and started in about the flowers, whether we ought to send the arrangements on to the church or the senior center, and then she saw the table. I had laid it out like a proof, because that is the only way I know how to lay anything out. The charcoal rubbing at the top. Beside it, the shop proof with her mother's April signature. Beside that, Rockport's carbon of the October order with Beth's own name signed at the foot of it. And the box, turned so the lid faced her, 5 words in her hand across the tape. And then the letters, fanned the whole length of the table, dozens of them, everyone still sealed. My son's writing on the front and nothing at all on the back, because not one of them had ever even been opened. She stopped talking about the flowers. I asked her to sit. She did not sit. "Where did you get those?" she said. "Not what are they. Where did you get those?" As though the wrong in the room were mine, for finding them. "Your mother's studio," I said. She had the rubbing. Rockport had the rest. Did you know they keep a copy of everything? Something crossed her face, quick, and was gone. Beth. I laid my hand flat on the letters, the way you steady a thing that might blow off the table. I have the proof your mother signed in the spring and the order you signed in the fall. I have the box in your own hand. I have Gerard Pelletier's word and his carbon to set beside it. I am not asking you what happened. I know what happened. I am asking you why. I want to tell you she crumpled. She did not crumple. My daughter has never crumpled a day in her life. She stood at the end of that table with her coat still on, and when she finally spoke, her voice came low and even and terrible in how reasonable it was trying to stay. You have no idea what these years were, she said. You weren't here. Not really. You'd go out to your stones and leave the rest of it to me. I bathed her. I did her medicines at 2 in the morning. I learned the sound her breathing made on a bad night. 8 years, Dad. And you know what she used to say to me, lying there, more times than I can count? She'd say, I wonder where Cal is tonight. Not thank you. Not I'm glad it's you. I wonder where Cal is. Her lips pressed flat. He left. He broke her heart and left, and he was still the one she watched the window for. I could stand in that room and give her everything I had, and she'd look past me at the glass. So you took his letters. I protected her. The word came out hard. The first one, I swear to you. The first one I only meant to hold on to. He'd asked us for money the last time we all spoke. You remember that. And then here he comes writing again. And I thought, not while she's this fragile. I'll read it first. I'll make sure it won't hurt her. She looked at the fanned envelopes, and I watched her keep herself from counting them. And then it was easier not to hand her that one either. And then it was simply how things were. And you told Cal, I said. You told him we wanted nothing to do with him. For the first time her chin moved, the smallest fracture in it. He needed to stop hoping, she said. It was kinder. You don't understand. Every letter just kept the two of them bleeding. I ended it. I was the only one with the stomach to actually end it. I took a breath before I answered, because I had one thing to say, and I meant to say it without lifting my voice, since lifting my voice would only let her make this about my temper instead of her choice. She found out, I said. In September, one letter got past you. She'd already put his name back on that stone in the spring, before she ever saw it, because she'd never once given him up. But in September she read him in his own words, and a few weeks after that, his name came off the granite for good. I watched her face. Did you see her read it? Is that why you changed the stone? She looked at me like she knew, Beth said. After everything I had done for her, all she wanted was him. There it was. Then, out of her own mouth and not my guessing at it. She had known the moment the truth reached her mother, and she had driven to Rockport to seal it back under. That is the part I cannot get around. Not the letters even. A frightened person hides a letter. But your mother made her last clear wish in ink, and you went behind her and unmade it while she was too far gone to catch you, and then you stood up at that unveiling and told 60 people how she loved things done properly. My voice did go then, just at the end, just the once. You used your mother's own headstone to seal the lie shut over her. She was weeping by then, but they were not soft tears. They were furious ones. The tears of a person who has been right in her own mind so long that being wrong lands like an assault. I wanted her to love me the most, she said. Once. One time before she died. Is that the sin? Is that the unforgivable thing? And there it was, the whole engine of it, out on the table with all the rest. Not hatred of Cal. Not really about Cal at all. A woman who had decided, somewhere far back, that there was only so much of her mother's heart to go around, that her brother was drawing down her share of it, and who had spent 8 years and a gravestone trying to lock down a love that was never being rationed in the first place. I did not hate her. I have tried to explain that to people since, and I mostly fail at it. Sitting there, I looked at her and saw the 9-year-old who used to line her shoes up by the door, so certain that if she just kept her half of the world square enough, she would be the one chosen. I grieved for that child even as I could not bear what the woman had done with her. But grief is not the same thing as absolution, and I was finished confusing the two. For 8 years I had been managed, so that nobody would have to sit through a hard night. That was over now. Here is what is going to happen, I told her, and I held my voice level and kept it there. You are going to give me back every letter you kept. Every one. And you are not going to be the person who decides, ever again, what this family is allowed to know. She asked me what I meant to do. I told her the truth. I stood, and I lifted my son's number off the table and I said, "The thing your mother asked me to. I'm going to bring him home." I dialed the Nova Scotia number at 9 that night, standing in the kitchen with the letters still spread on the table behind me, and I will tell you my hand was not steady. It rang 4 times. I had already begun to believe it would ring forever, that the number was old, that I had missed him by a season the way we miss everyone, when the line opened and a man's voice said, "Yeah, hello?" 8 years is a long time. I had braced myself for the boy. This was not the boy. This was a low, tired, careful voice. A grown man's voice. A stranger's. And it was my son's. And for a second I could not make my mouth work. "Cal," I said. "It's your father." The silence that came back was so complete I could hear the wind moving against the phone wherever he was. "Dad." Flat. Not a question, and not a welcome. Just the word. Set down between us like something he had not decided whether to pick back up. Did something happen? Is this about Mom? He did not know. Of course he did not know. His mother had been in the ground 11 months, and no one had told him, because the person who would have told him was the person who made certain he was never told a thing. That was the hardest sentence I have ever had to say to another living soul, and I have buried a wife. I told him his mother died last fall. I told him quick and plain, because there is no slow way to say it that is not crueler. I heard him take the phone from his face. I heard the wind again. I did not rush him. When he came back, his voice had gone rough at the edges, and all he said was, "Nobody called me." "I know," I said. "I need you to listen, and I need you not to hang up, because you have every reason to, and I'm asking you not to. I found your letters, Cal. All of them. Every one you ever mailed her. She never refused a single one. She never even saw the most of them. Your mother did not stop wanting you. Somebody stopped the mail." I heard him breathing. "That was all, for a long while. You told me to stop coming back," he said finally. Quiet. Not cruel. Worse than cruel. Only true. That night. "You said if it was so hard for me to be here, I should quit coming." I did. I made myself stand in it. I said that, and it was the worst thing I have ever done, and I have no defense for it, and I am not calling to hand you one. I was wrong that night, and I stayed blind for 8 years after, and your mother spent the last strength she had trying to mend what I tore, and I could not even see it happening under my own roof. You don't owe me anything, Cal. Not a visit, not a word. But your mother left a wish behind her, and I mean to see it done, and I would rather you heard the whole of it from me than never heard it at all." The quiet on the line went on a long time. Then he said, "I'm not going to pretend, Dad. If I come, I'm not walking in there and acting like 8 years didn't happen. I don't know that I can even be in a room with Beth. I can't promise you a reunion. I don't have one in me. I'm not asking for one," I said. "Come for your mother. The rest can take whatever time it takes, or no time at all." He was quiet again. "Then give me 2 days. It's a long drive." He hung up before I could answer, which was its own small mercy, because I had no answer that would have held. He came on the 3rd day, in an old truck with Nova Scotia plates and a tarp lashed down over something in the bed. I watched him turn into the yard from the kitchen window, and I stayed where I was and let him set his own speed, because a man who has spent his whole life braced to be sent away ought to get to decide for himself how near he comes. He sat in the truck a while. Then he got out. 40 years old. Gray already coming in at the temples, the way it came early to all the men in Ruth's family, though he was not born to them. I remember thinking how strange and how right it was that he had picked up their gray anyway, the way you pick up the ways of the people who raise you. He was broader than I carried him in my mind. Weathered. He had his mother's habit of going still while he decided a thing. We did not embrace. I want to be honest about that, because it would be easy to tell it the other way. We stood 8 feet apart in the yard where he learned to ride a bicycle, and he looked at me a long moment, and then he said, "Show me." So I showed him. I sat him at the same table where I had sat Beth, and I let the evidence do what I could not. He went through it without a word. The rubbing, the April proof, his name cut in beside his sister's in his mother's own hand. Rockport's carbon, the box with 5 words on the lid. He picked up his own letters one at a time, turned them over, saw the glue still sealed on every one, and something in his jaw worked and held. Then I gave him the last one, the white envelope, his September letter, the single one that got through. I watched him know it. watched him understand that of all of them, this was the one she had held. He read his own words back to himself. Then he turned it over the way I had, and he found his mother. Please help me bring him home. He put his hand over his mouth and sat there, and he made no sound at all, and his shoulders went, and I did the only thing a father can do at a moment like that, which is nothing, which is stay, which is not look away from your child while the worst of it moves through him. When he could talk, it was not to me. He was looking at her writing. She wanted me home, he said, like a man learning a language a word at a time. And I stayed gone. This was the last one I ever sent her. I told myself if she didn't answer it, I'd take the hint for good. She didn't answer. So I let go that fall, right about the time she was dying, though I never knew it, because I finally believed the thing I'd spent my whole life bracing for, that they'd send me back and mean it. You were lied to, I said, by somebody who worked at it for 8 years running. That is not being sent back, Cal, that is being robbed. He shook his head, not to argue, only to carry it. He was not going to be talked out of his grief, and I was not going to insult him by trying. Some things do not get mended in a kitchen in an afternoon. Some things maybe never get mended at all, only carried a different way. But he had come. He was sitting at Ruth's table with her note in his hands. That was not nothing. In a family, that is very nearly the whole of it, that a person comes at all when it would be so much easier to stay gone. After a while I told him what I meant to do about the stone. That I was going to put his name back where his mother had cut it, with my own 2 hands, and that I wanted no crowd for it and no speeches. God help us, no speeches, just the name and the mourning. He was quiet a moment. Then he said he would be there, but not up close. Not yet. He would stand back at the edge, he said, where he could see it, and still leave if he had to. I told him the edge was fine. The edge was where we would start. There is a right way to put a name back, and I meant to do this one right, because doing it any other way would have made me no better than the hand that took it off. The cemetery is run out of a little office by the gate, and the woman who keeps it, Carol Innes, has buried half this town with more grace than the town ever thought to thank her for. I brought her all of it. Ruth signed proof with both names on it. Rockport's carbon of the October order. Gerard drove over himself and stood in that office and told her, in his own words, what his shop had done and on whose signature it had done it. Carol listened, and she made her calls, and she checked every piece of it against her own record of what had been said in her ground. She told me I had every right to restore the stone to the inscription its owner had approved and paid for. There was one condition, and I was glad of the condition. The person who had ordered the change had to sign the reversal herself. Beth had put her name to sealing her brother out. She was going to put her name to letting him back in. She signed it in that office without a word, while I stood and watched. Then Carol handed me the permit and told me to take whatever time I needed, and said the gate would be open before first light. Now I could go up with my chisels. I went up to the cemetery in the dark, the way I used to go to a job before the heat of the day, my tools in the canvas roll that has ridden on my shoulder for 40 years. I brought the rubbing. It seemed only right that the thing which first told me the truth should be the thing that put it back. I taped it over the plaque and transferred the letters through it, so the ghost Beth had sealed under the polish came up again in soft pencil, exactly where Ruth had said it, exactly the size Ruth had approved. Caleb. Then I took out my chisels and cut back through the resin she had hidden him under, and I opened the letters to the air again, in the dark, by feel, the way you learn to work stone when your eyes are the first thing you expect to lose. Beth came while I was still cutting. I had told her to. Not to watch, and not so I could forgive her, which was not a thing I had in my hands to give that morning, and may never have. She came because there was one thing left in her keeping that was never hers, and she was going to give it back with her own hands. She carried a grocery sack, and in it were the last of the letters, the ones she had held out of the box, and a bundle of Ruth's own, Ruth's letters to Cal, the ones that never went, lifted out of the outgoing mail all those years the same as she lifted the ones coming in. She set the sack down on the grass near me and did not try to talk over the sound of the chisel. When I stopped to breathe, she said, "Lo, I'll do what you said. All of it. The shop, the announcement, the record." Her voice caught on the word. "I'll write it down true and let it stand. Even the part that's me." "You will," I said. "Not unkind, only certain. And you are done being the keeper of it. Your mother's letters, her studio, the story of this whole family, you don't hold the key to any of that anymore. That's finished." I nodded toward the edge of the cemetery. "And when your brother is ready to hear it, And not one day sooner, you are going to tell him yourself. Your own words. What you did, and why. I will not carry that message for you. Nobody in this family is ever going to carry another person's message again. She looked over to where a man stood beside an old truck with his hands in his pockets. Too far to hear us, near enough to be here. Her brother had not come a single step closer than that, and he was not going to, and she understood it. Whatever she had readied to say to him died in her throat. She had spent 8 years making certain the distance between them held. Now she would have to live inside it. That was the shape her sentence took. Not a cell and not a courtroom. Only the exact distance she had built, made permanent, with her standing on the far side of it from the brother she exiled, for as long as it took him to decide otherwise. If he ever did, I went back to the stone. There is a thing that happens when you cut a name you love. The work stops feeling like work. Each letter rose up under the chisel, and I thought about the boy it belonged to the snowstorm. Ruth drove through to go and get him, the crayon boat with too many portholes, the bang of a screen door and a kid's feet coming up the stairs 2 at a time. For 8 years I had let a silence tell me my son had stopped loving this family. I understood, kneeling there in the frost with his name coming back into the granite, just how wrong a thing that was to believe. Silence proves nothing. Silence is only silence. It is not the same as gone not when there is a person planted in the middle of every word, choosing which ones are allowed to land. The sun came up over the harbor while I was cutting the last of it. The light ran flat across the stone the way it had at the unveiling. Only now there was no shadow of a buried name, because the name was buried no longer. It stood cut clean and open to the morning. Beloved wife, mother of Beth and Caleb, both of them, the way she wrote it, the way she wanted it, the way it was going to stay. I sat back on my heels, and my hands ached, and I let them ache. Cal came then. He crossed the whole cemetery slow, past his sister, who did not reach for him, and had the sense not to, and he knelt down in the wet grass beside me, and looked at his own name in his mother's stone for a long time, saying nothing. Then he took something from inside his coat. One envelope. One of his own, out of the box, still sealed. One of the dozens Beth had kept his mother from ever opening. Of all the letters he had sent into the dark, this was the one he had asked me for back. He stood it against the base of the stone, under his name, in the frost. She never got to open it, he said. So I'll leave it here with her. Some things you deliver just so they're delivered, not so they get read. We stayed a while, the 2 of us on our knees in the cold, and behind us, at her distance, Beth stayed too, and none of us said a word, because there was nothing left to say that the stone was not already saying better, in Ruth's own hand, in the plain fact of a name given back. That is where I will leave us. A father and a son on their knees in the frost, a letter finally delivered, a name in the light. And off at the edge, a daughter learning how to stand in the space she made, which may be the longest sentence of all of it, and the nearest thing to justice this family had left in it to give. If a silence ever talked you into believing that somebody stopped loving you, I hope you remember this stone. Ask who was carrying the messages. Ask what you never got to see with your own eyes. And then tell me, because I could never settle it myself after stealing 8 years from her mother and her brother. Could a person like Beth ever truly earn her way back? I have my long mornings on it, and no answer yet. I would rather hear yours. Stay with me, and I will tell you another one soon.